Tom Clark's Main Event is a Boink Studios production. Follow us on Twitter and Facebook at Boink Studios, and check us out on boinkstudios.com, where you can see all of our projects, past, present, and future. And now, on with the show.
This is Daddy's show. Step off.
Hey, what is up? Welcome to the program, folks. Thank you for tuning in. Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Tom Clark, and you are listening to Tom Clark's Main Event. This is episode number 74 of the podcast, and if you're joining us today for the very first time, we will bid you welcome. If you're coming back for a repeat visit, we say, hey, thanks for checking back in with us. And to all those involved, we will extend to you, as always, the customary laurel and a hearty handshake. Thanks for listening. Thanks for reading. Thanks for supporting. And hey, thanks for always being there, Doc. This is episode number 74. That's cool, right? Every time we do a show, I feel like I need to get a pat on the back or something. How big is my ego right now? While there's certainly many podcasts out there to choose from, and many that are much deeper than 74 episodes. We're going to thank you folks out there right now for choosing to listen to our little show here. And yeah, I'm pretty happy with 74, man. So here's to 74 more, right? It's not like it's an anniversary or anything, but kind of cool if it was. What is the 75th anniversary? Is that gold? I don't know. I gotta look that up. I gotta Google that. If it is, I expect some gold, just so you guys know. Give me something. Give me something, man. Help a brother out. I'm just saying. So, hey, what's up? Welcome back to the program. Glad you are with us. This is the Main Event. I am Tom Clark, and this is going to be a good one. I've kept this one under wraps for a while now. I teased it on Facebook a couple of weeks ago, and I haven't really said much to anybody about it, but here it is. This time, the main event is, well, you guessed it, folks, just by reading the title, right? The Pat Laprade interview. For you guys out there that may not know who Pat is an accomplished author. His recent book is called Sisterhood of the Squared Circle, and it's all about women's wrestling. And for any of you folks out there that have known me longer than 5 minutes and have read my work over the years, then you know full well that I've always been a big proponent of women's wrestling. I think that women's wrestling has the ability to be huge, to do good business, as we've seen over the past year to year and a half, I would say now, right? I was one of those guys during the Attitude Era that, you know, every time it started to get a little ridiculous on TV, I sort of sat back and said, well, this is not for me. Let's turn it back to Nitro. Hard to believe, right? With all the beautiful women running around half naked on TV. But, you know, I've always been a diehard wrestling fan. And we're going to talk about that, a lot of that actually, during the interview with Pat here. But the book is really good. You got to get your hands on it. It's really good. Pat's people reached out to me a couple weeks ago about setting up this interview and sent me a copy of the book. So many thanks to them for doing that. And yeah, it's the book is well researched. It's well written. And if you're a pro wrestling fan, you got to get your hands on a copy of this. Like I said, it's excellent reading. Well worth your time. Pat is a very interesting guy and very fun to talk to. And in fact, the interview was only supposed to go for about 20 minutes, which was my call. We ended up going about 40, and I could have kept talking. We kept talking after we stopped recording, and it was finally, he's like, I got to go, man. You have to get a life, Tom. So I was like, okay. So I sheepishly lowered my head and walked in the other direction. Something like that, right? But nah, man, I like it. I mean, you guys know me, dude. I'm a wrestling fan, and I love talking this stuff. And you know, Pat's just another one of those guys that he's a lifelong fan himself, and once you start talking, man, it's hard to stop. Do you know what I mean? So, very good conversation. A very smart guy. Got a lot of heart for the business, and I think you're going to enjoy this one. We've got some more stuff in the pipeline, just so you guys know. Got a couple more things lined up coming up in the very near future, and we'll be telling you about that as time goes on here. Before we get to the interview, we have to go ahead and let you know we've always tried to be transparent and let you guys know what's going on with us as a production company and everything. We let the cat out of the bag on the latest episode of Tom Clark's 30-Minute Fun Show. We now have a brand new website. Well, it's not brand new. It's been there for a while, but we've recently, finally, folks, we got the domain name. That's right, people. BoinkStudios.com is a thing. So, yes, thank God. I love it. I haven't owned a website name in a lot of years, man. So the last time I did was back during the wrestling days. And, it's a cool site. And not only is BoinkStudios.com a thing now, we have some things in the works that we're probably going to try to grow the website. And that means possibly bringing on board some other writers. So we'll see how that goes. That's a very early process. It's all in its infancy right now, as it were. And we're just sort of talking to a couple of folks right now. So we'll see how it all plays out. As always, we got to thank you folks for tuning in. We got to thank you for supporting us like we do on every episode. And hopefully you'll enjoy this. And please go check out the website. Give us some feedback. Let us know what you think. You can always get in touch with us at boinkstudios@yahoo.com. Well, that's enough of me talking about this and setting this up and cutting a promo before the guy comes on. So let's go ahead and get to the interview, folks. Here we go. This is the interview with Pat Laprade, and as soon as it's over, we'll be back to wrap things up. So stay tuned for that. And without further ado, let's roll it. Pat Laprade, thanks for joining us today on Tom Clark's Main Event. How are you, sir?
Very good yourself. Thanks for having me.
Doing great. Absolutely. Thanks for being here. I imagine you're busy doing a lot of press lately. What with the new book come out, yes?
Yes, I did quite a few. It's always a thrill to talk about your what I consider my newest baby, my newborn. So it's always a pleasure to talk about wrestling, period, but especially when you have a new book released.
And the book in question is Sisterhood of the Squared Circle: The History and Rise of Women's Wrestling. I've gotten some into this, and I'm working on it. I read on it pretty much every day now. And this has been a favorite topic of mine as a fan and as a pro wrestling writer myself. And I love that it's time for this book. Was that what you felt going into this project? It's time to do this?
Well, it was the right timing. Let's say it this way. I mean, women's wrestling has never been as pushed in the WWE and as popular as, we have to go back to the 1940s and early 1950s to see that level of popularity towards women's wrestling. Me and my co-author, Dan Murphy, were sitting at a Shimmer women athletes tapings. Shimmer, which is the biggest women's all-female promotion here in North America. And it's in Berwyn, Illinois, near Chicago. And we're sitting there because, we go to pretty much, almost all the shows. And it was an idea I had in the back of my mind for a few years. I was just waiting to have an opportunity to pitch it. And my usual partner in crime, Bertrand Ebert, with whom I wrote other books like the Montreal Wrestling History book, Mad Dogs, Midgets, and Screwjobs, was working on his biography on Pat Patterson. So I had nothing on my side. So I pitched it to Dan, said, hey, that's a great idea. Dan is working for the Pro Wrestling Illustrated. He's taking care of, among other things, the PWI 500 and the female 50. So, he knows his women's wrestling as well. So we pitched it to ECW Press, and they were thrilled by the idea and started working on the book. And a year later, we were done with it and just waiting for this time to come around and be able, to share it with all the wrestling fans out there.
I'm sure it's a hit. It's got to be a hit. Anybody out there that's a wrestling fan has got to love this book. I mean, the research you put into it. Talk to me about the amount of research. Where did you have to go to get information? Who did you talk to? Like, talking about the very beginnings of women's wrestling. How far back did you have to go here?
Well, we went back to the late 1800s. There were some books on women's fighting that were already released, but not too much into pro wrestling. But in the early stage of pro wrestling, back in the late 80s, early 1800s, and early 1900s. So we're able to get some information there. Internet is such a wide search engine that, we're able to get a lot of information by doing, research online, trying to find, on message boards. There's so many stuff you can find out there. But besides the early stage of women's wrestling, a lot of the information we're lucky enough to be close to Greg Oliver, who's an author as well. He wrote several wrestling books, and he's the editor of Slam Wrestling, the biggest wrestling website in Canada. And this is an idea he had several years ago. He wanted to do he did a few books called Pro Wrestling, the Hall of Fame, the Heels, or the Heroes and the Canadians and those kind of books. And he wanted to do one about the women. And finally, the project never materialized. But a lot of the research and a lot of interviews actually were done by him and by someone who was working for him, Jamie Melissa. She had interviewed a lot of the women that actually passed away since. And that was a big help. In the sense that, we were able to get first-hand information on people that by the time we had the idea for the book, we couldn't get anymore. So, and Greg was kind enough to share all of his files with Dan and I. So, that got us to a good start. Before even doing one interview, doing 1 hour of research, we already had all of those information coming over. So it was a big help. And, then we started doing interviews with some of the women we wanted to talk about, and doing more research online, trying to find gems, interviews that were not really publicized, and see what kind of information we could find. And any historical book, the challenge is always to find not only information, but the right information, because we have to double check some facts and to make sure that, we're not saying, some stupidity in the book. So that's always a big challenge in any historical book.
In the course of your research, and you've been connected to the business for a long time yourself, but during the course of your research, was there anything that jumped out at you that made you take a step back that maybe you didn't know?
Oh, there's a lot of stuff that I didn't know. Of course, mm-hmm. I had a pretty good understanding of what of the history of women's wrestling, but on the surface, when you dig into it, probably the most fascinating story to me is the relation between Billy Wolf and Mildred Burke. I knew about that story, but again, only on the surface. But when you dig into it, you see how a terrible human being Billy Wolf was, and at the same time, he was a great promoter for women's wrestling, just on the business side, because mm-hmm. He did. Maybe they were not paid. Maybe they could have been paid more than they were paid, but at the same time, they were living a heck of a life. You know, they were traveling all over North America. They were doing what they wanted to do, which was wrestling, and it was working because other promoters tried their hands at the women's wrestling promotion, and it didn't work as much as it worked with Billy Wolf and Mildred Burke. You know, they had a relation pretty much like I'd say Vince McMahon and Hulk Hogan. You know, in the sense that, you know, they both needed each other to make this a success. But I mean, Mildred Burke was so influential to the next generations of female wrestlers. I mean, even Fabulous Moolah started wrestling because she went to see the matches, and Mildred was on the show, and she was hooked, you know, just by seeing Mildred Burke wrestling. And I mean, so if there's no Burke, there's no Moolah, and if there's no Moolah, God knows, you know, what the scene looks like. Because she was the one, even she was not as successful as Billy Wolf and Mildred Burke. She was the bridge, you know, from Burke to the rock and wrestling era from the early 80s or the mid 80s. So yeah, I mean, there was, you know, that relation, Wolf and Burke, it is so messed up, and it was just fascinating to see all the stories coming out from the woman who actually lived that era, yeah, so probably that's the most fascinating story to me.
That's some amazing stuff right there, because you think about the number of guys in the business who have come up and said, you know, I was inspired by Ric Flair, from Shawn Michaels to Triple H to God knows Chris Jericho. How many other guys are in the business or were in the business because of Flair? So had it not been for Mildred Burke, like you said, I can't imagine if women's wrestling would have even gotten off the ground the way it has now.
Well, it probably would, but probably in a different way. Probably maybe years later. You know, it's hard to tell because, you know, it's like anything else. You know, what would happen to WWE if John Cena would have been fired 10 years ago? You know, I mean, it's somebody else would have stepped up to the plate. So but definitely it tells you the importance that Mildred Burke played in that history. And unfortunately, it's a woman who that we kind of forgot with years. You know, a lot of people think that Moolah, that women's wrestling started with Moolah, and they couldn't be far away from the truth. I mean, Moolah started in the mid-50s, early to mid-50s, when Burke, you know, was on her way out. But I mean, Mildred was there since the beginning of the 1940s, and before that, there was a woman like Clara Mortensen, who was the champion before, and I mean, there were other girls, you know, wrestling, like we said in the beginning of the interview, from the early 1900s. But it's an history that, you know, not every people know, very few people actually know, and I think it was another reason why this book was so important to be done.
Absolutely. I mean, this, like you said, not a lot of people know, so this book will fill in the blanks for a lot of fans, I'm sure. So you've been involved with female promotions in the past, Shimmer being one of them, and I know that there have been some great female workers out there, some great talents, but for a lot of pro wrestling fans, the focus is WWE. So were you frustrated over the years when you tune into Raw and there's bra and panty matches, there's gravy boat matches, there's mud matches? I mean, did that frustrate you to the point, because obviously you appreciate women's wrestling, but what, as a fan, did it just make you want to go, man, I'm turning this off, this is ridiculous?
Actually, to tell you the truth, I say that in one of the acknowledgement chapter at the very end, but I started getting into women's wrestling maybe late in my life, in the sense that back when the Brian Penny's matches were happening, I was just a regular wrestling fan. I was not. I didn't. Women's wrestling was not something I was looking to. It's not something that I was just a wrestling fan. Whatever product, you put in front of my eyes, I would watch, But in 2006, in Montreal, there's the daughter of a former wrestler here. I don't know if the name Leduc will ring a bell.
Yes.
Joe Leduc, he had a fake brother in wrestling called Paul Leduc. So Paul's daughter, Kim, started a wrestling promotion here. It was supposed to be an all-female wrestling promotion, but there were some men wrestling on it as well, but it was mostly women. And it was the first one of the sort here in Montreal. And she started that with Lufisto, who is a well-known female wrestler. And I was involved in the management of the promotion alongside another wrestler, Sweet Cherry. So there were, it was the four of us. And that's really when there was something that clicked, and I was like, wow, this is such a unique product that, you don't see every day, and there were no other promotions like the one we were running. We were not in competition with anybody else because of that uniqueness. So that's really when I started, getting more involved with women's wrestling. And then came Femme Fatale, NCW Femme Fatale, who was really, really only an all-female promotion. And that came, I think it's 2008, maybe 2009, my memory. I think 2006, 2008. Yeah, end of 2008. It started. And then, we brought here in Montreal, women that, from all over the world. They were like, you're gonna see Billie Kay on NXT. Before she was Jessie McKay, she's from Australia, and she actually wrestles for Femme Fatale here in Montreal. Amber Moon used to wrestle under the name of Athena, and she was one of the wrestlers coming to Montreal. And we had a very good relationship with WSU, a very good one with Shimmer as well. And I started going to the Shimmer shows in Berwyn, and my love for women's wrestling just grew, grew, and from all the shows I was actually going to, and from the product I was watching, and from my involvement into the women's scene as well. So that but it really started in 2006 with the ALF, which was called here in Montreal. So at the time, the bra and pennies, I mean, to me it was just it was not something that. I mean, I was younger. It was just, oh man, it's good-looking women doing stuff in the ring that that I don't really care about, but they're good-looking women, So I was acting pretty much like any guy from in their early 20s would have reacted back then. But of course, when I see those matches today with the eyes I have in 2017, of course it was terrible, and it was not something that I can understand why not a lot of people were actually interested in the matches, but more into the women who were wrestling those matches, if we can even call that wrestling. So, but it was in an era where wrestling was watched by so many people, and that's why there's two profiles in the book that we really discussed, Dan and I, to see if we're going to keep them or not. And those were Tori Wilson and Stacy Keibler. Because if you look at the book, there's no valet, there's no ring announcer, there's no promoters. Well, Stephanie McMahon kind of, is a promoter, but we talk a lot about, what she did in the ring as well. But what we wanted to do is to talk about women wrestlers, and not just women in wrestling. It was really important to us. But Tori and Stacy were from that Attitude Era, and they were so popular. They're still, household names to this day. And what they did were bra and penny matches, So we went out there and we did a lot of research trying to, get, as much new information as possible. And it was just funny to me to read an interview with Stacy Keibler that says that, you know, she was not good at wrestling, and she knew about that. And I just kind of find that honest, you know. Hey, you know, she was paid to do a role, to portray a role, to portray a character, and you know, she did it, you know, and it was bras and pennies match, and it was evening gown match. It was all that kind of stuff that you don't see anymore, thankfully. But it was what women's wrestling was back in 1999, 2000. And I mean, Tori and Stacey were just too popular and too well known to just, you know, close our eyes and you know, do like they never existed, because it was not the type of wrestling that we want to see today, you know. So that's how some decisions were taken, and you know, I'm very glad we stick to those profiles, because I think, you know, it gives the reader a full experience of what women's wrestling, you know, was and became, and it's still something that, you know, women's wrestling have trouble just, you know. It's a reputation, those, you know, bra and pennies matches and half-naked women out there. It's a reputation that still today these women have trouble to shake off from. So it's, so I'm glad we actually, you know, stick to our guns and then talk about all that, because it gives the reader a better understanding of, every era of women's wrestling.
It was a catch-22, I guess, right? Because on one hand, it was nonsense, but on the other hand, they were getting on TV when some guys couldn't get on TV to save their life. So at least they were getting exposure. Exposure, no pun intended, by the way. But just to look at that.
But just to add on that, because a lot of women's wrestlers actually started as a valet or did a lot of you know, managing, like Sherry Martel or Luna Vachon. And what we really try to do is to focus on their wrestling and not what they did, you know, outside the ring. So we're going to mention that, you know, Sherry Martel was a great valet, or that Luna Vachon has managed, you know, this wrestler or that wrestler. But at the end of the day, we just, you know, mentioned that in passing, and we really concentrated the writing on what they accomplished as professional wrestlers. So that was really important to us as well.
It's amazing the evolution from then to now. I mean, you look at Sasha Banks, Charlotte, Becky Lynch, Bayley. I mean, it's just some amazing stuff that's happening in WWE right now. I mean, can it get any better? I guess it can get better if they can headline WrestleMania. Do you think that's possible?
It'd be possible. It's funny because I had the exact same conversation with a few people last year, and my belief is it's possible with the right people. And I do think that from the and it's not a knock on anybody on the main roster right now, but I don't think that there's two women there who could actually main event WrestleMania. That's a huge step from main eventing just a regular pay-per-view or main eventing a SmackDown or Raw. I do think they would need a more known name to that roster. And the person I have in mind, and we talk about it in the book, is Ronda Rousey. Ronda, who openly says that she loves wrestling. She did an angle a few years ago with The Rock, Stephanie, and Triple H. She, you know, and why I'm saying that is that I'm not sure if Vince McMahon would actually see two women being able to, you know, I'm not sure if you would see money out of two women main eventing WrestleMania. I'm not sure he's there yet in his, you know, openness to women wrestling. But Ronda Rousey has credentials. You know, she legit drew like 1 million and something people for pay-per-views. And that's the kind of numbers that will talk to Vince, you know. And to have her main event against, I guess some people would say, well, it would have to be Stephanie. I mean, yes, it could be Stephanie. It won't be the same match though. But, you know, against maybe a Ronda and a Charlotte Flair could be something that would make actually people to believe that two women can actually main event WrestleMania. But I do think, and again, it's not a knock on the talent that these women have. It's not a knock on their personalities. It's really not that. It's just that I don't think that on the short term, the people deciding who's going to main event a huge show like WrestleMania, I don't think that these people are there yet. Maybe 5 years from now, maybe 10 years from now. But with the roster that they have right now, without a household name like Ronda Rousey, and to be honest, I cannot think of anybody else than Ronda to do that. So it's not like there's a lot of options, you know. But you know, just last WrestleMania, the SmackDown women's match was clearly the buffer match. You know, it was given 5 minutes between the two main events, and my guess is that, you know, if they would have, you know, ran late, that's probably the match that would have been cut. So to go from there to having, you know, two women main eventing WrestleMania, there's a long way to go.
I see that. I mean, that makes a lot of sense. Do you think maybe that fans push a little bit too hard? Because it's funny that when Sasha and Charlotte started getting red hot and they were popping the crowds, and it was, I mean, I was in Charlotte and saw live when Sasha won the belt from Charlotte when she had her against the barricade in the crowd.
Mm-hmm.
And I've been in some live crowds before, man, and that was one of the loudest pops I've ever been a part of. But then, like, they get to Hell in a Cell, and maybe the finish is not what it could be, and then people are complaining. Oh, it's overexposure. It's too much. I'm like, dude, we went from nothing to prime time for women's wrestling. How do you complain about it now? It didn't make any sense to me at all.
Well, my complaint about that was not, I mean, it was already the first Hell in a Cell women's match, right?
Right.
And it was the main event of the pay-per-view, right? But the thing was that my complaint was that, and we actually talk about that in the book because it was at the very end of you know, any edit we could actually do to the book. At one point, you know, they were changing the titles so many times that, you know, we thought we couldn't just keep up, but we were able to. But my complaint was that first pay-per-view main event was decided at the very last minute. So last minute that they were not able to promote it. It was the first time in history that two women were main eventing a pay-per-view in WWE. I mean, there's only one first time. You understand?
Yeah.
So I mean, it was already the first Hell in a Cell women's match. It was enough of a hype to get it there. Take the time to build that first main event, that first pay-per-view main event. Take the time to promote it properly, so people get even more interested in that main event, you know. And that's the complaint I had about that particular match. Not about the finish, or not about, of course, you know, Sasha winning would have gotten a bigger pop, you know. But that was beyond the real matter to me, which was it was not, you know, promoted as you know what it could have been.
Do you think that was hesitation on WWE's part to not announce that, not promote it, and just make? Could it have been the company was perhaps worried that if they booked it as the main event? If
you're worried, and if it's going to be a last minute decision, just don't do it then.
Exactly.
If you're not, if you don't have time, if you thought about it, you know, so long that you know you're making your decision the Saturday before, the Friday before, and you don't have Raw and SmackDown to promote it, well, just don't do it then. Just wait. Just wait for another pay-per-view to put those two in a main event position. Cause, and that's, like I said, that's the knock I had. And it was not, again, it's not Sasha or Charlotte's fault at all. But still, it's just a matter that if you're too last minute to do it properly, well, just wait then. Just don't do it. Don't rush it. Again, because there's only one first time, and that first time is gone now. So next time it's going to happen, it won't be the same novelty. And WWE is good sometimes to erase its own history. But I mean, not a year or two after, people will still remember that first pay-per-view. So I don't know when will be the next time that we're going to see two women headline a pay-per-view. It was cool this week to see the women main eventing SmackDown, with a big angle. So, there's still a lot behind women's wrestling. I'm sure that, Hunter and Steph are really, really behind that. But, there's some decisions that I can question,
It'd be such a shame if they lost a step now because they've come such a long way. And they are the most public pro wrestling company to mainstream media, to mainstream fans. They're it. There's plenty of great wrestling promotions out there. I mean, from New Japan, Ring of Honor, and several others. But to the mainstream pro wrestling audience, WWE is it. So if they were to drop the ball, and let's say a year from now we're looking back on this interview and looking back on this era and saying, God, what happened? That would be such a shame for the women's wrestling in that company.
But I don't think they're going to drop the ball. I mean, they have not always taken the easy road. Remember when that so-called revolution started? I mean, instead of just letting the fans grow a liking to these girls, like organically, they make teams like a teacher will do. They just those three will be together, and those three, instead of just letting the fans just get into that new thing they were trying to do, and it was a bumpy road, when it first started, but still they were able to overcome that, and they were able to put women's wrestling to a level that, has never been put before in WWE. So I mean, I'm sure they won't drop the ball, but sometimes they're going to make a few mistakes here and there, which I guess is normal to a degree. And, but if their focus is to make sure that this division is, no longer going back to what it was once, I mean, if that's the focus, they're gonna succeed it. It's just that, sometimes you take some decisions that are not. I don't think that not promoting the first women's main event on a pay-per-view is dropping the ball, but it doesn't help getting that division where it could actually be. So. Mm-hmm.
The audience has really matured. I know that for a fact. The audience has really matured to the point where now, I mean, they've done so much over the past year and a half, I would say, that now it's no longer even a question. Are the women going to have a good match? Well, yeah, of course they are. They're going to go in there and kill it because they really want this, and you could tell they want it. And there's so many times I've watched Becky and Sasha and Charlotte, all three, and Bayley, of course, and you can just see it that, okay, we're here to work. We're just put me to work. Put me in the ring, let me go to work. And Becky Lynch gave an interview with Stone Cold Steve Austin, and he says, how long do you want to do this? How long do you plan on doing this? And she said, till the wheels fall off. And that was one of the best quotes I've ever heard. Because it's like, listen, I want to be a wrestler. That's what I'm here for. Put me in the ring, let me work. And I think that's awesome. They've got the right women with the right attitudes, I think, right now.
But it's also very tough on them because at the beginning, I mean, fans were not expecting, they were not expecting like such good matches. But now they do. So when the match is just, good instead of very good, well, the fans are like, it seems like I've seen better matches, better women's matches. Something that, you didn't hear, when you first saw Natalia and Charlotte on NXT on the first NXT takeover, something you didn't really say when you saw Sasha and Bayley in Brooklyn a few years ago. So it's getting tougher on them because now fans, like you said, are expecting them to have a good or very good or great match. So it's more pressure, and I think we have, that's a good thing, that's a very good thing in the sense that at least it shows that these women can perform to that level. But I guess, it's more pressure and it's more, it's tougher on them.
Do you think that company's going at the right pace right now, all things considered? And as you said, there are always going to be missteps along the way, but...
Talking about the women's division or in general?
Yes.
Women's division?
Yes.
Well, I think they didn't lose the focus put on women. Maybe WrestleMania this year wasn't the best. Probably that WrestleMania 32 was better for the women's division than WrestleMania 33. But still, they have some great talent on the main roster. Naomi she's improved so much. She's definitely the best female worker from the Diva era. And she can go. She's very athletic. I really, really enjoy watching Naomi. She has a style that nobody else has on that roster. At one point, they will need new faces, though. So you will need to bring the Asukas and Amber Moons and those girls who are killing in NXT, and they're signing so many women that they're going to have women to replace those on NXT. And there's the women's tournament coming along, and that will help also, So like I said, their focus is there. I have no doubt about that. They're taking a lot of good decisions, like the women's tournament and stuff like that, to put over women's wrestling as much as they can.
Is there a danger with Asuka in the undefeated streak? Obviously you don't want 50-50 booking with anyone. Not if you want them to be a star for you, obviously. But is there a danger? Does that back her into a corner where when the moment happens that she actually does drop the pin to someone else, it'll be anticlimactic, or should they just continue what they're doing with her right now?
She doesn't have to. If they want her on the main roster, she can always lose the title in a 3-way or in a 4-way without getting pinned. So they can always protect her that way if it's important to them to keep that streak coming to WWE. Again, I'm just not sure if for them it's not two different universes, and no pun intended as well. But it's two different universes in the sense that she could lose a match on NXT and be brought up to the main roster and start a new undefeated streak on the main roster. So there's a few options with her, but definitely, if you're just looking at talent, she's more than ready for the main roster. Like Shinsuke was ready a year ago for the main roster, So, but yeah, at one point they'll have to bring her up.
We've seen the Cruiserweights get to a 5 Live. We know that they're going to do the United Kingdom Championship on the WWE Network. Should the women get their own show?
They with all the signings they did in the past year, and with probably more signing with the women's tournament, because I guess they won't be doing the same mistakes they did with the Cruiserweight tournament, and because of the guys like Kota Ibushi or Zack Sabre Jr. weren't signed and were like really well put on the well placed on the tournament. My feeling is that they're going to be more signing from that women's tournament, so they're going to have more than enough to actually do a female version of 205 Live or the UK thing that they're going to be doing. So yeah, I see that as it's probably the next step after the women's tournament. I really see that. Yeah, definitely.
I think that would be a great touch. I think that's the next step of their evolution. So how do you feel right now about women's wrestling? Are you confident about it? Like you said, you think the company's going at the right pace. There's a lot of talent outside of WWE, as we said before. So
it's I mean, like indie wrestling in general, there's never been a better moment to be a women's wrestler. Besides WWE, who take a lot, who take a lot of or sign a lot of women. TNA is signing some too. I mean, Ali, Cherry Bomb on the independent scene is one of the women who really who is really pushed there with Sienna. All those girls were like working on the indies before. She's not there anymore, but Mia Yim was the champion on TNA as well. So, even if it's not what it used to be, but it's in better shape than it was, I guess, a year ago. So TNA is there as well. And you have, you have Shimmer, who is still very, very, rich in terms of quality of wrestling, quality of wrestlers, and even if they're getting hit, from time to time from women getting signed, they still find new talent. They still bring some talent from overseas, and it's still great shows, time after time. So I've seen two women from Progress in Orlando during WrestleMania weekend. Tony, my gosh, I hate when I forget a name like that, but it's Tony Storm, and I think it was Ginny. Yeah, Tony Storm and Ginny, both from Progress Wrestling, and they had such a good match, better than a lot of women's matches I've seen. These two girls are not even signed yet. They're not, doing Shimmer, but they're very, very good, and they're there. So, there's a lot of talent to discover. There's a lot of talent. And that's why it's so important, for WWE to push the women the right way, because it has a direct effect on women wanted to become professional wrestler, because now they're, here in Montreal, we have, Kevin Owens, obviously, Sami Zayn, both guys are from Montreal, from the province of Quebec, and you can see there's a lot more interest into professional wrestling here in the province because of Kevin and Sami's success in WWE. The same thing goes for the women. There's a lot of women out there who maybe are fans of pro wrestling and maybe never thought of becoming a pro wrestler, but now that they're seeing that, women's wrestling is really taken seriously by WWE, well, maybe they will start training, and they will, push themselves to one day, be the next Sasha Banks or the next Bayley or the next Charlotte. And that's important as well, So yeah, I do think, that women's wrestling is on the right path. And not just WWE, but in general. Let's just hope that, it stays that way.
Oh, I would love to see it. I've been a fan of women's wrestling for a long time. And I was one of those guys that, my friends and I would watch Nitro and Raw and flip back and forth. And when the women were doing something silly, and I'm a young man when this is happening, we just kind of flipped the channel. We were Stone Cold Wrestling fans. That's what we were there for. And every time the silliness started, we said, well, it's going to go on Nitro. So now that they've come to this point, I just couldn't be happier. I think they're doing amazing work right now.
And WWE isn't like I said, I think they're doing the right moves. They're not doing all the right moves, but they're doing a lot of right moves. And when I hear that they're probably going to be signing a girl like Io Shirai from Japan, I mean, that's music to my ears. It's good that they're not only trying to sign women from North America, but also from overseas. And that's just, because, for a long time, Japanese wrestlers, both male and female, were not, they were not really signed by WWE, because there was such a contrast of style and such a huge, they really have to adapt, to North America, not only to the North American style, but also to North America, right. to the United States, and it's just a cool thing that they go outside, they think outside the box and sign Asuka, and hopefully they will get more of those Japanese wrestlers, because I mean the Joshis are so good, and they have been good for the last 35 years. Women's wrestling in Japan is completely different from what it is here in North America. Maybe less now, but it was, so different back in the 80s and the 90s. And that's a big chapter that we have in the book is the international report, in which, most of it is what wrestling was in Japan. And it's, it's a very, very interesting chapter if you never really followed the scene over there. Because, I mean, those women could wrestle like if they were men. They were doing, such great matches. I mean, you can like him or not, but Dave Meltzer rated a lot of, All Japan women matches 5 stars or 4 stars or 4.5 stars. And I mean, that says a lot on the quality of wrestling that these girls were showing at a time where here, you had Fabulous Moolah kicking and punching and pulling hair, and it was really a big contrast of style, so it's a very interesting chapter for anyone who didn't really know what was going on in Japan at the time.
Well, as we said before, the book that you're referencing, Sisterhood of the Squared Circle, The History and Rise of Women's Wrestling. So far, it's a great read. Can't wait to finish it. And before we let you go, let the folks out there know how they can find you. How can they find the book? Where can they find you on social media and so on?
They can find the book on Amazon, Sisterhood of the Squared Circle. Also, they can find it in bookstores. If the bookstore nearby doesn't have it, you can order it from your local bookstore. You can find me on social medias. You can follow me on Twitter at Pat Laprade, Patlaprade. You can just look at the book and you'll have the right spelling. It's a French Canadian name, and you can also add me on Facebook, Pat Laprade, as well, Instagram too. So don't hesitate to talk wrestling with me. Always a pleasure to talk with fans, and especially anyone who has read the book and just want to give me their thoughts or just comment on it. I'll be more than happy to discuss women's wrestling with them.
Sounds great, Pat. Listen, I appreciate your time. Thanks for being on the show. And good luck to you in everything you're going to do in the future. If this book is any indication of the stuff you've done in the past, man, it's some great stuff. So congratulations to you as well.
Thank you very much, Tom. Thanks for having me.
My thanks to Pat Laprade for the interview. Told you guys he was fun. Hope you enjoyed that. Very cool guy. Very cool to talk to. Also got to send a shout out to Tanya at ECW Press. Hope I pronounced your name correctly. Thank you very much for the invite and for setting this thing up. It was a blast to do. Pat raised a few very interesting points, actually. Well, more than a few during this interview. One of the primary ones being, of course, that he doesn't feel that there are 2 women in WWE at this point today that could main event a WrestleMania, which I'm sure took a lot of you guys by surprise. It kind of took me by surprise as well, because when we think about the term or the notion of main event WrestleMania for women, then we automatically think of Charlotte and Sasha. But that's may not be the case. He made a great point about Ronda Rousey, that Ronda brings more eyes to the product, that she is a natural, and she would be a natural in a WWE ring. I don't know if that's going to happen. I think anything's possible, and I think every time that we think we know better than the powers that be behind the curtain, then we're more than a bit foolish. So anything's possible. How that would affect the company, how that would affect the girls already there, it's sort of it harkens back to the Brock Lesnar situation. You got this guy that's never there, and he comes in. I mean, he is one of the boys. I mean, obviously, but do the guys look at Brock as being one of the boys because he's not there full time? There's some shades of gray to this. I don't think it's any of it's a slam dunk. However, having said that, you put Ronda Rousey on WWE television, and ratings are instantly going to get you're instantly going to get a pop in ratings. You're going to pop the crowd, obviously, and who knows? She gets in there like Kurt Angle did. She could be a complete natural, and pro wrestling might be just as normal and natural for her as the fighting was. I don't know. Great points he made, though, man, and I'm down with that. I've after hearing his take on that, and his take on the women main eventing Hell in a Cell for the first time, and how it's never been done, and now the novelty won't be there because they didn't promote it properly, and you only ever have the one opportunity to do something for the first time. And this is the cool part, man, about meeting and talking to other pro wrestling writers and to other fans, is because you can get differing opinions and get different points of view. And I'm all about that. I always have been. I love the debate. I love the conversation. That's who I am. That's what I do for a living. So I love it. And I think Pat's one of those guys that brings a different sort of look to it. He's very practical in his approach. And I think he truly wants women's wrestling to do well, as a lot of us do. And a lot of that, of course, is thanks to the moves that Triple H has made behind the scenes to, sort of bring legitimacy to the women's division in the way that maybe we've never seen before. So kudos to them for that. Hope you enjoyed this show. Hope you liked the interview. It was very cool to do, very fun to do. We're going to have Pat back on. He's going to have another book that he's working on next year, and I'm not going to tell you what it's about. It can be a surprise. But we've already spoke a couple of different times here about doing something in the future. So I'll be on the list of guys he speaks to, and that'll be cool for the show, and hopefully cool for you guys. Hopefully you're into this and you appreciate what Pat has to offer, because again, it's a great opinion, and he's an accomplished author, man. He's out there doing it and living the dream. So again, my thanks to Pat Laprade. Very fun interview. That's it for us, man. We're going to go ahead and take this thing home. We're going to tell you once again real quick how you can find us. Again, the brand new, the sort of brand new, boinkstudios.com. Just punch it in your little Google machine and go to work, dude. Go check us out online. You can also find us, of course, as always, on Facebook and on Twitter. And if you'd like to drop us a line, check us out, give us an email, whatever you want to do, man. Cool with me. I'm taking a very Dean Ambrose approach to that. Did you catch that? boinkstudios@yahoo.com. Don't forget about our sister podcasts. We've got two that are available on iTunes as well as Google Play. That is, of course, Tom and Kyle's Comedy Action Hour. We've recently got an episode up of that within the past couple of weeks, and also the latest edition of Tom Clark's 30-Minute Fun Show. And again, those two shows along with this show, all three available on iTunes, Google Play. So please subscribe and download today. Support your local pro wrestling podcaster and fool, that's me. Kyle and I greatly appreciate it. So that's it, man. We're done. We're taking this sucker home. Thanks again for listening. Thanks again for being here. Come back again for episode number 75. We'll be back real soon, and we do appreciate your business. We will see you next time on Tom Clark's Main Event.